You're live,
We're
George.
live. Okay, we're live. Thank you. Thank you for the warning. All right, I should have been ready for that. Welcome, folks. We're glad you guys are joining us tonight. This is our weekly podcast. This is like episode 20 something, 27.
I know Mariah was telling me that. I was like, my word, 27 episodes already. That seemed to go
Yes,
fast.
I know it did. It did actually go fast. Anyway, tonight we're gonna be talking about some cool, you know, very popular subjects, pastoring and following a pastor, and why you need a pastor. Frankly, I know that's very hard for some people to grasp, and human nature definitely bears that out. But as always, I'm your host, Jordan. This is Pastor Ford.
Hello.
We are here in San Mateo County, and we are glad you're joining us. Let's start this right off with saying, please ask questions. We do have a topic, we do have subjects that we talk about, and we want to keep a flow going. But listen, we are here for you. We're not here for us. We're not here to be entertaining. This isn't just another program to keep us busy. This is specifically aimed at reaching your heart. And so I know you guys have questions, especially when we bring up topics like this that are very relevant to everybody. You guys ask them. Feel free, and you can ask the questions in the chat section, or you can put them in the comment section, and we'll field those as they come in. So let's start off talking again about why you need a pastor. So what is a pastor? It's just super plain answer. Don't go too far into it because I don't want you to kill the next couple questions. But what is a pastor? For those of you that don't actually know what a pastor is, it a priest? Is it a surrogate father? Is it what's a pastor?
uh, Good question. How would I describe? So the word pastor in the Bible means shepherd, and that. So the true sense, if we want to get down to the right understanding of what actually a pastor is a pastor is a shepherd. And it's funny because I was just laughing about that because I just mentioned earlier about the conversation that I had about wanting to change something out of my personality. But a pastor, I've been to Israel and I've met shepherds. I've met shepherds. They're Bedouins, and I've met them. And they're the grossest people on the planet. And I thought, it just hit me right now. I'm perfect. I fit because that's a shepherd. They're dirty. They don't take baths. I mean, they're field people.
Yeah,
They're not clean people, and they herd sheep around. And and they've got to clean them, and all that. And so it's nasty people taking care of nasty animals.
Yeah.
So
this is a biblical principle, by the way. It didn't just come up inside of nowhere.
It just hit me all of a sudden. I was just thinking about it, and I thought, it is a nasty job. But what's so ironic and so funny about it is because there's so much parallel to that. People can be nasty, and being a shepherd sometimes is nasty business. So it's not me as the clean person, taking care of nasty people, but sometimes the nasty guy taking care of nasty people, having to work through my own problems as well. So there really is. But that's the issue is that the job of anything that you could come up with when you think about herding sheep, tending sheep, keeping track of sheep, that really is what a pastor is somebody who has this. It's going to be fun tonight. We're going to have a fun time tonight, I can tell. Somebody who is able to have a concern for people at a higher level than most in a bizarre way. And that really is the issue, is in a bizarre sort of way, to be worried and concerned about things that other people don't worry about.
Give me an example. Give me an example of something that a pastor would be concerned about that maybe, I don't really know what other position to compare it to. I don't want to there's other things I want to mention, but well, just tell me something that'd be unique to a pastor.
Yeah. Really wanting to see people make it, that are not they're not your family.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even your friends necessarily. There can be overlaps. I do have my family attends my church, and I have friends in the church. But at a distant relationship level, wanting to see people make it, and it's funny because I'm thinking about it, and I've got specific people in mind who I don't really have much of a relationship with at all, and I want to see them make it. in life, to be a success, and not a success just, worldly wise, but to be able to, I want them to be able to stand before God and have made it, and then to look over their shoulder and look at me and say, hey, thanks. I didn't really appreciate it in life, but now I do. That kind of a thing.
Question and a comment. Very cool.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that I got a lot of comments on the sermon on Sunday, which is funny because I started this thing of wanting to change my personality, something in my personality, just to prove that it could be done. I do this a lot in life. I do this a lot where I try to change things or do things that are supposed to be undoable. And so I kind of got this idea recently. I wanted to change something out of my personality for good, just simply because the common thinking is that you can't change your personality because it's just how you were born. And so I'm doing that. So after I got finished on Sunday morning with the service, usually when I finish a service, I usually have kind of a feel like I thought that went really, really well, or it didn't go as well as I hoped it had. But I actually, when I finished the sermon, I forgot to ask myself that question. Did it go well or didn't it go well? And so then I walked into the video room, and the response was, that was a really, really good sermon.
Yeah.
And it needs to go on the top 10 list, which was like, nobody's been doing anything on the top 10. And so it was at the point where I was like, screw you, I'll just make my own top 10 then, the ones that I think are the best.
Did I tell you guys that he's a pastor, by the way? On topic.
And but then all of a sudden, and now, by the way, I enjoyed your sermon on Sunday. The times when I very rarely get comments, and I'm not looking for them. Don't start people giving me comments. Yeah. I very rarely get comments, and so used to not getting comments. But the irony was that this sermon, this Sunday, I got a lot of really good comments when I didn't even think about it. Mm. And so it was just kind of funny, as far as that goes. And so how should someone become a pastor? The answer to that question is you have to become a real follower of Jesus. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. If you want to be a pastor, you have to be willing to deal with everything in your life. I mean, that really is what it comes down to at the end of the day, is you have to be willing to, like what I'm doing, like what I talk about doing, when I talk about changing things in myself and being willing to experiment with your theology and try to come up with ways that help people. It is becoming a shepherd. I mean, that really is what it comes down to, being willing to do the things other people won't do. Okay, enough. Let's not go too far. It says you deserve them. I don't. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on now.
Okay. Okay. So actually, on that note, where did the idea of a pastor come from? Where is this something that was set in place, like as the church began to grow, or is it, who came up with the idea of pastors?
Well, Jesus says, "I'm the good shepherd." So that's where the pastoring idea, shepherding, because that's actually what the word means, pastor, shepherd. Right. And so that's where it started. But it also says in the book of Ephesians, I never can remember I think it's Ephesians chapter 4, because I always remember it as Ephesians chapter 5, and I'm always wrong, and I for some reason can't fix this. But where it says God has given gifts to the church, pastors, evangelists, prophets, teachers, for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry. And so that's that's where it starts. It's God. It's a God ordained thing.
Mm-hmm. There's another question, actually.
Okay, I don't know if we want to go down this road. Let's maybe we should we could dedicate a whole podcast to this, so we don't get
gifts.
No. She's talking about personality things,
okay. Personality
issues.
Right.
Let me. So I'll just kind of give a quick answer to that. Is that there? Maybe we should just go. We'll go with a whole. Maybe we should do a whole thing on it. But let me just give you my idea on why I've even started to rethink all this stuff. Is that I don't believe anymore in the such thing as personality. And the reason is because there's a huge definition to that, which is basically the definition of a rock. Unchangeable. It's this, it's that, it's the other thing. It has these features to it, and it's something that has taken form. All this kind of stuff. Real rigid thinking. I would like to replace the word personality with predisposition, and I'll tell you what. We don't want to go down this road.
We don't have to.
The reason why, because I'm saying we're going to get going down this road and not talk about pastoring. But the reason why I say that is because the idea of predisposition. I'll tell you where it came from, where I got this idea, because we talk about this. We talk about genetic predisposition.
Right. Yep.
Okay, but when we talk about that, and a lot of the science today that we're learning is that you don't have to follow the predisposition. You don't have to, but it is there. You don't have to go with it, though. It doesn't have to become who you are. And we now have a new study called epigenetics. What?
Keep going.
Okay, so we have the study of epigenetics, which is basically the ability of being able to turn on and turn off genes. So we may have that predisposition, but we can turn those things off so they're no longer a part of our disposition. And I think that's true of all of personality. That's my theory. Okay, at this point, it's just a theory. It's not. I don't have it all nailed down yet, but that's just kind of one of my life theories that I'm thinking about right now, is the idea of genetic predisposition and being able to switch those things off. And so I think the same thing's true of personalities. We have these predispositions. Some of those things we don't want to turn off. We don't want to turn them off. Like, your kids, for example, my grandkids, I wouldn't want them to stop being who they are, because that's what makes me laugh is because they're doing it because it's coming out of who they are. And they're funny things, and they're not the same, so they're things that shouldn't be turned off. But what I'm more aiming towards is that the things that we call personality that are really a negative for our lives, being able, so I think we can switch those off.
Yeah.
And so that's the whole idea. And so personality traits linked to our spiritual gifts, I don't think so. I really don't think so. And the reason why I say that is because you look at somebody like, for example, like Martin Luther, and the kind of person that he was and what God's plan was for his life. Totally separate trajectories. He was a monk. He wanted to become a monk, go live in a monastery and have nothing to do with anybody. Yeah. And that was his way of being. Yeah. And then all of a sudden he's kicked into the limelight, and has no option but to become a leader. Moses.
Big time too.
To give a more specific one that we have a more ready bio on is Moses. Moses, the deliverer of Israel. Not his personality, not his personality by any stretch of the imagination.
Yep. Yeah,
so
there's a bunch like that. Gideon,
yes.
A whole bunch like that.
Yeah. So that element, I don't see Paul personality wise as fitting as the apostle that he was.
Yeah. Decent questions. You got that before I did.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So should pastors go to seminary? No, absolutely not. That'd be like trying to go to school for becoming a shepherd. Think about that. What if you didn't know anything about shepherding and you went to school and they said, okay, this is a dingleberry. Okay, another line of work. So I wouldn't think so. Well, it's good that we're getting these questions. Paul, I'm not sure what the first part is. Doesn't, I'm not sure. Paul support turning on and off personality traits and being all things to all things. Yeah, so that's I mean, that's what I'm leaning towards. That's the thing that I'm leaning towards, is the idea that, we are called to be all things to all men. And so really, I think this idea of personality, the idea, okay, so really...
Should we just ad hoc this personality thing
I know,
now?
I just kind of went right in here. Okay,
switching topics now.
I feel like I'm riding a wild stallion right now.
And you're just going with it too.
Slow down. Okay.
Okay, the seminary question.
Okay. Oh.
But okay,
I'm going to be tired by the time this thing's over.
the question about Paul supporting turning on and off personality. I'll mark that down, and we can bring that up. You know, we can do that on the next podcast.
Yeah. So maybe make notes
I'm
of
actually
that. And I'll just say
inspired.
some little things.
Yeah.
So seminary. So I would say that this is okay. This has been something that's been mentioned. The idea of seminary as a disadvantage. This is this is something that Pastor Mitchell said from a long time ago, and the answer is So what happens in seminary is you lose all the dynamics of what being a Christian is in order to in going into seminary. You can because one of my big concerns of people is the need for the ability to be able to read the Word of God without becoming I'm not sure of the word that I want to use for this, without becoming a bookworm. That's not really the right word that I'm looking for, because it's not the knowledge, that part of it. It's just the idea of when you go to seminary, you learn a lot of stuff, you fill your head with a bunch of stuff, you've got a lot of knowledge, and you actually think you know something. And like any school, and anybody out there is listening who's been and out and has many years after university can attest, is that now I didn't have a clue. I had a degree and I was still an idiot when it came to the reality of what I actually went to school for, because it isn't until you actually work in the environment of which you're studying for that the reality comes in. Like I remember, I didn't go to a university, but I did go to tech school, and graduating from the tech school, everybody was convinced they were going to be the first ones in line for the big paying jobs because they got this degree. And then I'd hear them talking, and I'd realize, what, they don't know what they're talking about. It was electronics and computer science degree, and they're talking about stuff, and I'm thinking, you don't know. Your responses are they're book accurate responses, but my personal experience in this background, I know that book answer is wrong. In this particular situation, that they're talking about, using the book answer is actually the wrong thing.
Theologian, is that the word you're looking for?
No, I mean, yes, sort of, but it's more. It's a whole way of thinking. It's a whole philosophy of thinking. People, like I said, people who can, as a pastor, looking at this as a pastor of people who I know they haven't a clue what the Bible says, but they've memorized long passages of the Bible and can quote scriptures, but they really can't make sense of it. In the regular course of their lives, they really don't have a handle at all on what they think they know. And so it's knowledge without wisdom. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. That's why I can't find the right word in terms of how to define it, because there's a difference between wisdom and knowledge. Knowledge is something you can have, but wisdom is something you can only have through experience, through actually having built that knowledge with action, and so that kind of a thing.
So, okay. All right. Real quick. We're really glad for these questions, but we're asking the questions from the perspective of the pastor. And the topic title tonight, and I do kind of want to stay on this because the topic is why you need a pastor.
Yeah.
And so I want to go back to Black Kaiser's question, what qualification should a person have to be a pastor? What I want to ask, I want to kind of take a liberty with that question, is ask more, what qualifies somebody to be a pastor?
God. Yeah, I mean, that's, you don't need anybody's approval in terms of at the level of pastoring people. You don't need people to approve you of being the pastor, which is one of the great things about our fellowship, is what we did a long time ago, is that you don't vote in and out a pastor. The congregation has no control over who its pastor is. It's from the top down. It goes the other direction, which that's where the approval really needs to come from. Right. It needs to be other pastors who say, you can pastor. There's so many little tiny dynamics in there. I mean, the fact that my pastor would be willing to, put his seal of approval on my pastoring, that says a lot to me personally about, wow, even so when I'm questioning my ability to do the job, I can look back at the fact that I know that there are people above me who actually, they have have a confidence in me. They're willing. It's not that. It's funny because having become a pastor, you realize you put people in positions and you think, oh God, this is the dumbest idea ever. I hope you know what you're doing. Because I don't have that confidence that they're going to do well, but I know that God has kind of put His seal of approval, and has kind of put it on my heart that this person will be the right person for this position, and then that way, so I understand that it's not just Pastor Warner thinking that I'm the greatest guy in the world. It could be very well that Pastor Warner is saying, God, I hope you know what you're doing with this guy, because this guy's a mess.
Yeah.
So there's, so I don't want to be too focused on the idea that this is a perfect plan.
Right.
It's the grace of God. That's what Paul says. It was the grace of God that he counted me faithful, putting me in the ministry.
Yeah. So there's interesting thought that you just brought up about how our fellowship has kind of put things in place, and how pastors are sent out and given trust and invested in, and men are raised up. It's very, very the way this fellowship does it. No, I really am careful to say this fellowship often, because a lot of people might not understand what that means, especially new converts, new folks who have no idea what we're talking about. But tell me how that process differs from your ordinary church.
Ordinary.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, in a sense, we're not your ordinary fellowship.
Yes.
So that from that standpoint. Yeah. So that's from that standpoint. Because a lot of the things that we have put in place have been from seeing the bad fruit of some of these other ordinary ways of doing things. The seminary being one of those. So
describe real brief, what is the process of seminary like?
It's college or university.
Yeah, okay.
It's you're going to school and learning how to be a pastor, which is, it's funny. It's like going, I can't, we do train people to do all this kind of stuff, but it's like, it's funny. I remember, so I'll give it in terms of an illustration. One day, my wife and I, we were coming home from church. Actually, we were coming home from an outreach on a Saturday. We were out pretty late. And there was a woman out hitchhiking, staggering drunk. And so I was afraid for her life. I thought, you're stupid. What are you doing out here? She's staggering home drunk, hitchhiking home. And so I stopped and I picked her up, and my wife was with me, and she got in the back of the car, and I said, what are you doing? You shouldn't be doing this. I says, look at you. You're so drunk and this is so dangerous. And through her slurs, she said, don't tell me how to live my life. I'm a psychologist. I went, what?
I'm surprised you haven't used that in a sermon.
So there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. That's why the whole school idea, trying to train somebody to be something, not to know something is impossible.
Yeah.
And pastoring is without a doubt a be something vocation. It is not a do something.
So, I
don't know if that answered your question about fellowship.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. So I was, if you think, so you mentioned a scripture a minute ago in Ephesians. He talks about, God gave some prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers, and so he mentions these different positions, right? But they're all kind of lumped in together, but they're all specific, but all focused on the same thing. Why? Maybe this is something that's kind of developed in our modern age, or maybe it's something that's been misdirected or whatever, but what is it about the pastor, the position of a pastor, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, but what's the position of a pastor? Why is it unique compared to those other ones, like the other, prophets, evangelists? And there seems to be kind of like a, we were talking about this the other day, the desire for superiority. Me and my wife were talking about this, and they call it all kinds of other stuff. The cry for this is actually really the cry for equality, and that cry for that is actually the cry for not equality, but superiority.
Yeah.
And so that idea of reaching for the position,
right?
And so, is the position special, or is it just one of
Well,
many.
it's funny you mentioned that, because I was just going to mention that, those those are not there. We have to be really careful with this. This is one of those things that I mentioned about Scripture and knowing Scripture is how easy it is for us to read things into Scripture that aren't there, because we've read it, and we read it, we know the Scripture, and then we put our interpretation on it based on our lack of experience. But that list is not necessarily in a hierarchy. But I had a guy come into our church when we were in San Francisco, and just to kind of insinuate, he's not the pastor, he's just visiting, he's only come a couple of services, and he wants to make it very clear that he's a prophet.
A couple guys like that.
And then and then I'm a pastor, and then to point out to me in Ephesians, you do realize that prophet comes before pastor.
He actually said that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, so here you are wandering through the universe, no accountability to anybody or anything. And you feel that that's a higher position, than apostle, pastor, teacher, prophet, the only thing higher than a prophet is the apostle. And so, and the apostles are important because they were the first, but there's such an overlap in all of those, because it says very clearly why those positions are there: for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry. Yeah. So the focus is on the saints. The focus is not on the position. It's on the saints. It's on the helping of the saints. And so that's your pastorate or your apostleship is worthless if it doesn't have to do with the perfecting or the building up of the saints. And so it's not the position, it's the responsibility.
So what is the responsibility of a pastor? You talked about what a pastor is, and so you kind of touched on this again, but like in a practical sense, what is the responsibility of a pastor? What's the place of a pastor in the church?
Feeding the sheep. That's Jesus says to Peter, he says, if you love me, feed my sheep. Do you love me? Yes, I love you. Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Yes, feed my lambs. And so he's that's the focus. And then Peter actually picks that same thought up in I think it's in 2 Peter. He actually picks that thought up again, where he says that those as overseers over you feed the flock of God, and then he gives some qualifications, not of greed, not as lording it over them, And so these kinds of ideas is the idea of feeding the sheep. It's, like I said, it's funny. There's so much, getting back to the idea of why you need a pastor, is to understand what God does to pastors, is something, because my personality, remember talking about my, the idea of genetics and stuff, my personality is, I don't care about people. I don't want to have anything to do with people. If I could just live my life for myself, I've joked about this many, many times over our podcast, but I've not had a problem with COVID at all. Shelter at home, cool. The only disappointment was not being able to go out to eat. Yeah. Other than that, it was like, and I'm just being me. I'm just being real. It's like, for me, the idea of fellowship is work. Yeah. Fellowshipping with people, especially the more people, the worse it is, because it's like, oh my word, just the amount of effort and energy I have to put into fellowshipping with a large group of people, because I'm going to be playing pastor and counselor and friend and, expected to keep the party going. There's just so many factors that are involved in having a bunch of, being at a get together with a bunch of people as the pastor, with people who are all part of the congregation. They're anticipating that the pastor is going to bring the entertainment, and so it's like, so COVID is like, COVID can't really fellowship. Sorry, we got COVID right now. So it's like, so it's like, and so it's, but at the same time, having said that, I can't help but have God constantly speaking to me about the well-being of people in the church and coming up with ways to help these people to do better. And so it's a real interesting thing that God would pick people like we talked about. We pick people that, that's not in their personality to do those things like pastoring, but yet then God starts doing things like teaching you how to be compassionate, and to have a genuine heart for people, because you want to be like Christ. I mean, ultimately, and this is the great thing, ultimately being a Christian, is the goal. The goal is not to be a pastor. The goal is to be a Christian. And ultimately being a Christian is being like Christ. And that was probably one of the attributes that stands out above everything else about Jesus, is his compassion, which, is we'll go into it some other time, but that's not the same thing as caring about people.
Right.
And so, but that ability to be able to go past the nonsense, their quirks, their weirdness, even their physical and mental disabilities, to be able to go beyond that stuff, to be able to say, I want to help this person to be everything that God wants them to be, and to be able to do that it's something that God does in a pastor.
A couple questions here. We got our pastors only picked based on having knowledge of the Bible?
No, absolutely not. No, because it's not about knowledge of the Bible, and it goes back there. The comment that was made about making disciples is the main goal, and pastors play a role in that. It's also what plays a role in becoming a pastor. If you do not have disciples, then I highly recommend that you do not become a pastor. If you've never won anybody to Jesus, you will hate pastoring. You will absolutely hate it. And the reason why you will hate it is because it will be a continual struggle. It will be basically, you'll have two jobs, one you get paid and one you don't. And the one that you get paid is going to be your secular job, not the church. And so you're going to be working two jobs, making pay from only one of those jobs. And so it'll be the constant problem in your thinking of, why in the world am I even bothering doing this? Because it's just making my life more difficult. So, so Brittany's comment on what is the benefit of talking to a pastor about something over, say, a trusted mentor? Well, I actually thought of this before the podcast, especially because that's my daughter, Brittany, and she's in Tucson, and they're in a church. She's in a church there that has more than one pastor. And so here's the issue, and I'll answer that question this way. Probably the biggest mistake that you can make as a disciple in the church is to always go to the pastor that is going to tell you what you want to hear. Some pastors are the kind of, over the years, I've noticed this. There's always those pastors who will tell you what you need to hear. When I talk about pastor, I'm talking about obviously, the main pastor. The main pastor's carrying most of the weight, and then the assistant pastors are they're assisting. They're not carrying the full weight of that. And so you've got some pastors who will come in, and their sort of help in the church is they're really super friendly, and they're friends with everybody. And over the years, there's been certain assistant pastors that we've had that are like the coolest guys ever.
Yeah.
But they're not the guys that I would want to go to not for information, but for advice or for counseling, because I know they'll tell me exactly what I want to hear.
Yeah.
And that's the worst thing you want to have happen, is to have somebody like that as your, and so that's the problem with the quote trusted mentor, is you really need to have somebody over you who has the ability to be able to say something to you don't like, because that's so important. People come with life questions, and it's easy to take the sort of wide road of just trying to say, well, it could be like this, it could be like that, it could be the other thing, yeah, but hey, just yeah, sounds like a great idea, kind of approach, and it may not be the great idea in terms of their destiny. And so you really need somebody who's more concerned about your destiny than they are about your friendship.
Yeah.
So I think that's very important. Oh, very good question. Very good question. Is it okay to meet with pastors that aren't your pastors? Say our pastor's church is too big and can't meet with everyone. Now, I don't know who this is. You don't need to. Please don't give me a bio on the chat. But this is a very important question, and I can only speak out of my own personal thinking. Okay, this is my own personal, that I'm going to give you here as far as that goes. Is that my attitude is that I don't ever want to be so busy that I don't have time to be able to speak to everybody in church who needs to be spoken to. And so there's a philosophy that I have. Right now, it's not such a big deal. We don't have a huge congregation, but even when we'll have a service and we'll have 4 or 5 visitors, immediately when I get off the pulpit, people will want to come and talk to me. I don't ignore them, but I will cut the conversation short because I want to go talk to those new people. I don't, because they need me more than the old people need me. The old people can, they're doing fairly well. If it's a situation where somebody needs to talk, then they need to be able to talk. Like in our church, everybody has my phone number and they can call me, they can text me. Sometimes, I'll see a phone call come in and I'm studying or something like that. I won't answer it, because people need to understand that nobody had, I'm trying to answer a question really quickly that takes a really long time to answer, but it's very, very important. The bottom line is that it's very important that you're able to speak with your own pastor. It's very, very important. If you're going to pastors who are from another church, they don't know you, they don't know the circumstances. And really, if it's a wise pastor, he shouldn't be counseling you. It's coming more out of their ego than it is out of their genuine ability to be able to help you, because they don't know the whole story. They don't understand, they're missing the fact that every story has 2 sides. Yeah. And so you really need your pastor to be able to speak directly into your life. And so any pastor that is going to be effective in helping people has to learn how to be able to kind of set the tone that it's not capitalized isn't the word that I'm looking for. I'm sure somebody will be happy to help me with this, but you can't be expecting that you're going to be able to have, unlimited amount of attention just simply because you have more problems than other people. It's like, okay, quick conversation. Sometimes people want to engage me in conversation, talk deeply about their issue. And I'll say, well, from the sound of it, you're talking about this or that. No. You need to get the whole backstory here. No, I don't. I don't need to get the whole backstory. Just ask your question. And sometimes I'll do that in conversations with people. I'll go, okay, what is the question? You're telling me about all these random elements that you think are important to the situation, but I want to know what the question is to find out if it's even important to talk about right this second. And so I'm getting to all that, and I'm saying all this kind of stuff because I just want to give you the idea that the whole idea, monopolize, there it is. That's the word I was looking for. Ding, ding, ding. And so, yeah, so that nobody has the opportunity to do that, to monopolize your time. So that way you can, even if your church is 1,000 people, hopefully not all 1,000 of those people are going to have a problem at the same time. And then in a church that has thousands of people, you're going to have assistant pastors for that. And they'll be able to handle those much lower necessary needs. But then you've got the still deep life questions, that you can go to the main pastor for. And in our church in Tucson, that's always been the case. It's 800 something people. I know that I can pick up the phone and I can call Pastor Warner with something serious. But I also know that if I text or I call, I reach out to Pastor Warner in some way, that he may or may not get back to me right away if it's a low priority. But then there are other things. It's funny because Pastor Warner one time, Mariah's texting him. I had emailed him about something, hadn't heard anything for days. My wife had emailed him about something and said, yeah, I just emailed Pastor Warner and he got back to me. And I was like, you just emailed Pastor Warner like now, right now, and he got back to you like in the last 5 minutes. And I've been waiting 3 days to hear from Pastor Warner. And it's like, you'd think after 37 years, I'd get used to that's how he is about things because, I'm a big boy, I can take care of things. If my wife is texting him or emailing him, she's probably got something deep on her heart she wants to talk about.
There's another question here. Very good question.
What kind of things should you be going to headship for? Wow, um, that's hard to really quantify. That's a tough one, because you know, I let's put it this way: if you have that little thing down deep inside of you that says, "I'm about to make a bad choice," and then you say, well, I probably should talk to my pastor about it. And then you say, no, that's okay. I'll just work this out on my own. You probably need to talk to your pastor because you're about to blow yourself to smithereens. And so you really should be thinking along those lines of is this a life situation?
Yeah.
Not life threatening, but is this a life? Could this change the course of your life? I would say that would be a great place to start. Okay. That's a great question. So if people that aren't in your congregation reach out for biblical help or explanation, will you help? I refer back to how I answered the question before. Because I honestly do believe that. Yes, I will help. Whether or not that help will be of any real value other than to say, well, I think this is something you really need to talk to your pastor about, then it may only be to that. But I would say if this is something that you really are interested in getting help on, that you should try to approach your pastor about it and tell your pastor, listen, I'm thinking about going to another church for help, because I really need to talk to you. And then see what their response is. And if the response is, yeah, that's probably a good idea, well, there you go. You're in the wrong church. But I think the response will be, okay, hey, listen, let's talk such and such a day. If you're talking to a shepherd, and obviously you don't want to use that as a threat, every time you want to have an idle conversation about something. But if this is really something serious that you need help with, then you should be approaching the pastor and telling him, listen, I need to talk to you about this. And if you're only getting to the secretary, then you should tell the secretary, I'm thinking about going to another church to get help. So is the pastor available? And see if that doesn't change things.
Yeah, I want to chime in on that in form of question here. This is because we're dancing around the issue here, but this really does shed light on why you need a pastor. And so how important is it to have a relationship with your pastor?
Well, it's not just that it's the pastor. It's that there's so many. There's in England, we have a few places here what we call a roundabout, where you get on and so you go around this roundabout. It could be a multi-way stop. I've seen roundabouts with up to 6 or 7 different exits coming off of them. And so you go around them and you need a little bit of skill to be able to get off on the right one and be in the right lane at the right time. And sometimes the pastor is the roundabout, to help you to get off at the right exit, at the right time, at the right speed, right, and to be aware of the cars that are around you. So this is the issue is there's so many things that converge when it comes to a pastor. It's not just that he knows the Bible better than you. It's that he knows you. But for me personally, something that I've learned and something that some people don't learn until it's too late, which is unfortunate, is that you are not the best judge of you. Other people are always a better judge of you. You could have a room full of people. I'm reading a book right now. It's a kind of a silly book. It's a blow-off book called Green Lights by, what's his first name, Kevin?
Matthew McConaughey.
Matthew McConaughey. And he's talking about staying with this family in Australia, and he's staying with this family, and so he's in Australia, and he's with this family. This family, he's on an exchange, like a foreign exchange student program, and this family is just absolutely nuts. And he's trying to work this out, just is this culture or what is, because he's never been to Australia or whatever. And so on his last day there, he's with a group of people all together, and the members of this family are not there. And so they asked him the question, how were you able to survive with this family for so long? And he says, what are you saying? And he says, they're absolutely stinking nuts, those people. And everybody in the room is laughing and, and because it's a known fact that this family is a nutty family. But they don't know that they're a nutty family. And so the truth is, every one of us, every single one of us, has a group of people that all agree on what kind of person we are, and they are right. I'll leave that silence there for it to sink in. They are right, okay? And if you disagree with them all, then that crowd will only get bigger. And so you need to have somebody who has input into your life from the outside. That's very, very important. And that's the job of a pastor. So a congregation and making relationships with people in the congregation, those are the people that can speak into your life on the sort of non-essential level and help you to work through things like personality defects and things like that, help you to realize, when I came into the church and got saved, I was pretty messy. And, over the years, they literally trained me. I actually had a guy, I asked him if he would take me out, teach me how to buy a suit, because I didn't even know I never had a suit. And so I'm 21 years old, I never had a suit. And so I asked him if he would take me out and get a suit, because I didn't know how to have a suit, because I saw everybody's wearing, nice clothes in church, and I wasn't. And so I wanted to do that. So he took me out, and all day long, we're going around, he's taking me to these stores and showing me how to shop and how to buy this and that and what goes with what, and, how suits fit and this and that, and, all these kinds of things. And, and then he starts, talking about GQ magazines. You look like something out of GQ. And so we're striking poses. He's striking poses. I'm not. And I'm picking up these poses because I've never read GQ, so I don't know anything about this stuff. I'm not from there. And so I'm developing, things that weren't even part of me. And so, so at the congregational level, that's a great help. But when it comes to life issues, life direction, one of the things, because I don't tell people what to do, I just try to lead them in the right direction. It's funny. I'll let the secret out, because I can still cover it up and you'll never know, even if I told you the secret. So, but usually when people come to me, I say, well, this is kind of how I'm thinking that would probably be, more appropriate for the direction, what I know about you, the kind of realities, that are who the real you are. But if you want to be a real stupid idiot, you could do this. And then people go, thanks, I appreciate it, Pastor. And then they go away and they do the stupid idiot thing. Because I did it in such a way that I didn't actually tell them that they were a stupid idiot. I just told them that they might be, and then let them decide whether they are or not. And so, like I said, I can let the secret out and you still won't catch it. The best you can do is just to ask me, so are you giving me the stupid idiot line right now or what? And then I'm going to go, well, maybe, but maybe not. So, because there is a possibility, and I'll just cover it up. So I'll just play denial. But so that's the deal. So I saw my screen flipping. So let me go back here and see. Okay, yeah, great. Joni and Deandra, feel free to watch and to listen. And you're in another city and stuff. And so I'm glad you're on. I'm glad everybody's on. And everybody being on is a great help. I want to help as many people as I can. The whole focus of why I'm doing this podcast, just so everybody knows, is I'm glad that it's helping other people. But really, this is an outreach for us in our locality. And we really are trying to reach people in our locality to bring people to Jesus, to see them saved. And it has been very, very successful. I'm shocked at how successful it's become. It's been fantastic. I really enjoy it. And so, yeah, so to qualify, because that last question about the meaning, explanation of a verse, things like that, you can get that kind of stuff from anywhere. The thing to be careful of when it comes to getting guidance, I'm talking about more life guidance. You should have a pastor in your life, somebody that because the Bible says God places the members in the body where it pleases him. So he puts us in a church with the intention that the pastor of that church is going to help us to grow. So that's the whole idea of church. That's the whole idea of why these things why they kind of come together. Is it's not that the pastor's the greatest guy in the universe. It's the fact that this is what how God has created salvation to be. Salvation is you becoming a part of a church. And so if you say, I don't need a church, then you're creating your own salvation. You're making your own salvation. And all I can say to that is I hope you can save yourself. I doubt it, but I hope you can, because when you stand before Jesus in eternity, he's going to probably look at you and say, I never knew you. And so God places the members in the body where it pleases him, being part of a local church. That's sort of Christianity 101. Out of that, pastors, evangelists, prophets, and teachers from within that congregation, are the ones that God uses, and there's a consistency in their ministry that continues on at different levels. And so you may have people that have different gifts, but they're all, like what the Bible talks about, the diversity of gifts in 1 Corinthians 12, but the same Spirit. And so you want that. You want that cohesiveness of the gifts working together. And so that's why pastors are important. Not because they're some brilliant, person that's just got all the answers to everything. In fact, what I find is that, it's funny, and I was just talking with a couple in our church, marriage counseling, and she sent me a text saying that she said she was talking about this last weekend, that this has been the best weekend that we've had in 8.5 years of marriage. But go back to the last counseling session that I had with them. I'm just talking, and I'm hoping what I'm saying is making sense. And then when I finished, I said, I want to close in prayer. And I said, in my prayer, I said, God, I haven't a clue what I'm doing, but I hope you were able to use something that I said to say something to this couple that could actually help them. And so God answered my prayer. That's it really, because this is God's thing. This is the thing that's so funny, and why we started doing this, not your ordinary church, is to try to help people to understand that all the attitudes and all of the misgivings about church and the stereotype garbage of things that go on in church, these are things that all try to destroy the church from being what God wants it to be. And so I feel like I've been talking a very long time, so I need to stop.
Well, the questions are coming in regularly, so
I know.
you're getting them fast.
I know.
Perspective's an interesting thing here. I actually was mentioning this before.
Yeah.
Do we have another?
Quick answer, should pastoring be a full-time job? The answer to that is pastoring will pay as much as the pastor's worth. The labor's worthy of his hire.
Is that a yes or a no?
Exactly.
Okay, we were talking about this before, and again, the questions coming in are good, but again, they're from the perspective of being a pastor. Now we're talking about why you need one. So, what we were because we put together these thumbnails for the podcast, and you guys have probably all seen them, and we put them together, and we toss ideas, bounce ideas around, and specifically for the podcast, we were talking about. Myself, one of the guys, the guy that kind of heads up the thumbnails, and myself were talking about what to do for this podcast, of why you need a pastor, and so we were talking about the idea of like a military thing, like one emoji doing pull-ups or push-ups or something like that, and then the pastor emoji is kind of giving the kind of like the drill instructor, and then the person who made the first kind of rough draft was a picture of me, my avatar, in an inner tube, laying in a lake with a glass of a nice cold drink and an alligator behind me about to eat me. And you're up on a cliff with a flamethrower, keeping the alligator back. And so Pastor Ford is the one who has the final say in our thumbnails. He says yes, no, and he'll I like this one better. And so he immediately looked at us. I like Mariah's idea better. She was the one that made the rough draft of the alligator. And so right when he said that, I caught an idea of perspective. I caught a revelation on perspective. So the two guys coming up with the idea for the military thing and the drill instructor, we are disciples. So we're the ones who are under our pastor, and our pastor is the one who is over us. So we have a perspective And that was the perspective we were putting up of this military thing. And then you have the perspective of Mariah and Pastor Ford. By the way, Mariah is Pastor Ford's wife. So they have been pastoring together in multiple nations now and multiple cities for a long time. Their perspective on it is saving people, right? Our perspective is being told what to do. And so you have these two different perspectives, and obviously there's application of both. There's some truth to either one, but or to both. But my question is, why is there such a difference in perspective? I can give a biblical example of this. Moses is the one leading the children of Israel, and then God calls him up to go to the top of the mountain, and he goes up to the top of the mountain. God is speaking to him, giving him direction. That's where he gets the 10 Commandments. And the people are down waiting for him to come down and give them, direction. Where are we going to go next? What we're going to do next. But in Exodus 32, I think it is, the very first verse is they say, Aaron, who's one of the kind of under shepherds, he's like one of the main guys under Moses. They say, make us gods that'll go before us. As for Moses, this guy Moses, the man who brought us out of Egypt, we don't know what's become of him. And so you have, again, this different in perspective. Moses is up on the mountain receiving direction for them, right? But they get impatient with the man. Yeah. And so describe that to me. How does that apply today? Why is there such a difference in perspective?
Well, because you're not pastoring. I mean, because I've done both. I've been pastored and still being pastored and have been a pastor. I've realized, it's, of course, this is a given, of course, but I've come to appreciate my pastor having pastored, which I didn't appreciate before. Okay, I didn't the appreciation because there's a naiveness, that you have. There's an ignorance. It just like parents to children to parents. Mm-hmm. When you become a parent, you begin to understand why your parents did the things you did. I think it was my daughter who had mentioned, things that she told herself she would never say when she became a parent. And then she not only didn't keep that, actually verbatim used the exact same phrase and said, oh my God, I did it. I said the exact same thing that I said I would never say. And because when you're a kid and you hear that, it's stupid. But when you're a parent and you say it, it's not stupid. And so it's only because you can see it from both sides. And so it's the same thing with pastoring. Is the reason why the reason for the difference, I think, is just it's true of anything. This is why our generation has a problem with leadership. And the truth is, this is the reason why our problem, our generation, this generation or this time, is not as productive as days gone by. Because if you notice, the level of productivity, and when I say productivity, I mean of actually making something, not just discovering something, but being able to come up with creative ideas and put those creative ideas into practice, is because this generation doesn't follow. And because it doesn't follow, it's not capable of leading. Because you can only learn how to lead by following. And so that's the difference of perspective, is because the one perspective is always from the standpoint of, I want to be the leader. Yeah. I want to be the leader, and so, and the idea of thinking that the pastor, you made the statement, the one is being told what to do. Because that's all you ever know as the follower. That's all you ever know. It's not that you're always being told what to do. It's that's the nature of the relationship between you and a leader, is that he's to guide you and to lead you into direction. And you're going to really have a hard, could you imagine, you're driving down the street, you've got your GPS on, and your GPS says, turn right at the light. And you've been doing this for the last half hour, and you turn around and go, screw this, don't tell me what to do. And you turn off the GPS because you're mad. You're sick of being told what to do.
Why is there such an aversion to that? Why, especially today, why is there such an aversion to being told?
Well, you need to listen to my sermons on Sunday morning and Sunday night, because we tie our identity to our thinking.
Yeah.
And because we tie our identity to our thinking, then we sounds good. Yeah, sounds good. Good night. And so he's probably long gone. There's like a 30-40 second delay.
And I'm getting it after you get it.
Yeah.
So it's a lot.
So the bang, lost train of thought. Rewind.
Aversion to following, being told what to do.
Yeah.
Tie our ideas, our identity.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That was it. The tying of our identity. And so the tying of our identity to a thing. And so basically we see everything when we're told what to do, we interpret that as being wrong and being corrected. And everything's a correction. Turn right at the light doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that's the next thing you need to do. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you're wrong. And even if you knew to do it or not, there's no harm in hearing it. Mm-hmm. But we tie our identity to that, to that kind of the thinking. I know what to do. So when you don't know something, and this is funny, it's funny for me to watch in discipleship because disciples have different ways of handling this because they want to be disciples and so, but they don't want to be told what to do. And so it's funny, the juggling act when they've been told what to do, how they handle it. And you've got some that say, oh, I was going to do that. So it's okay for you to tell me that, but I was going to do it anyway. So you don't ever need to tell me anything because I always know what the next thing is to do, but it's okay for you to go ahead and tell me. So then that way they've got it worked out in their head. Even when I'm told what to do, I already know what I was going to do anyway. So I don't need to worry about, getting upset about this. And then you have the other ones who, like I said, they're the ones that get mad, I don't tell me what to do, let me figure it out on my own. It's like, that kind of a thing. And then you have all these sort of little nuancy kind of differences in between. And then you've got people who are just, I'm not even going to listen, because you're going to tell me what to do and I don't want to be told what to do. Yeah. So I'm not going to listen. And so actually I'm not going to do any things that I need to do in order to improve my life because I don't want to be told what to do. And there's some fantastic logic right there. But, so you have all these kinds of things, but it really does come down to the idea of being tied, and this is why people have a problem with having a pastor. And this is why I specifically, it's come around to where I can say this now. This is why, on purpose, that I told Jordan that we need to name this, You Need a Pastor. Because I knew that would upset some people. I knew for a fact it would, because there are people who would say that. And it wasn't my original idea. There's a show that I used to listen to by Daniel Lappin, I think his name is. He has this, he probably still does. I don't know. I haven't listened to it for a long time. He had a talk show and part of his tagline was, You Need a Rabbi. It was a radio rabbi. He's a rabbi. You need a rabbi. And it was funny to me that people would call the show. They would call the show and say, I listen to your show. I love your show, but I don't need a rabbi. And then they would go off on, how they agreed with him or talked about this or that or the other thing and had a conversation with him. But it was funny. It was like, you say you don't need a rabbi, but why are you listening to the show then? Because you need a rabbi. That's why. It's like, and people get this weird sort of thing going on in their thinking like that. And that was why I said that, because I wanted to trigger people into thinking, what was your response to that title when you saw that? You thought, oh, I got to listen to this because I don't need a rabbi. I don't need a pastor. Yeah. Well, that just shows you how much you need a pastor, is because you're listening. You want to know what's going to be said. You secretly want to know if you're going to learn anything from this, but you don't want to lead on that you need this, and that is a personality disorder. Okay. That is a personality disorder. And you just need to face the fact that you've got a real ego problem.
Yeah. So if you were to take for every Christian and every person thinking about becoming a Christian, if you were to remove the pastor from the picture, and we're talking about, what God's put in place. You said God qualifies a pastor. What if you were to remove the pastor from the equation, what do you have? What do people have? What do they become? What does the church become?
Well, sheep without a shepherd. That's the thing. Because this is where the Bible comes in. There's so many things in the Bible about this idea, of this is God's thing. So truthfully, people who have a problem with pastors have a problem with God. Yeah. It's not that they just have a problem with man. They have a problem with God and God's way of doing things, because God's the one who set this whole thing up. It wasn't any of our idea. And I can assure you, I can assure you, being a pastor, this is not a job you sign up for. This is a calling. That's anybody who goes to college, and I know people who do that. They've gone to college, they've gone to a seminary or something like that because they want to be a pastor. Those that are going because not because it's a calling. Sometimes people are going because they want to lead people. They want to be the leader, and so they want a job where they can tell people what to do. This is the worst job ever if that's what you want to be. Because it's not, because number one, it's a volunteer group of people. They're not getting paid to listen to you yell at them and tell them that they're wrong. And so and they can just go down to the church across town. They don't have to listen to you. And so, there's nothing ego rewarding in being a pastor, even if you've got thousands and thousands of people in your church, because all it takes is just that one or two people who hate your guts. And I think that's on purpose. I think God just brings people like that to church, just so pastors don't get too prideful.
Yeah, yeah. Just to weed out the hireling, which you just talked
Yeah,
about.
exactly.
Yeah, I've heard of stuff like that actually. So real quick question on the title pastor. Is calling someone pastor, is that like some old-fashioned outdated thing, or is that like similar to calling a teacher by Mr. or Mrs. by their last name? What's the thing of calling pastor?
I can't answer that. I really don't know the answer to that one, to be honest. Because there are scriptures in the Bible where he says to call no man father, call no man rabbi. And so for me, it's always been a term that I've really struggled with. And I really don't have the right answer. I've never ever, just thinking to make sure, I've had people ask me, what should I call you? And I always tell them the same thing: call me whatever you're comfortable with. Call me whatever you're comfortable with. Because on the one hand, there are people who calling me, by my name, it's just too hard for them. It's just too awkward for them, and they can't do it. And so it's like, okay, that's fine. Calling me pastor, calling me, it's like doctor, calling somebody a doctor. You don't really want to go to your doctor and say, hey, Bob. It's just something about keeping that relationship in perspective by the title. I'm just throwing it out there. And so there's nothing wrong with it. I don't believe that Jesus was being emphatic, that we're not allowed to use these terms, because what does Paul say? Paul says you may have 1,000 instructors, but you only have one father. I
was going to bring that up next.
So he calls himself father. So obviously you're not, there's more to this. It's the idea of title, and I do remember, I don't know how long this lasted. I don't think it lasted very long though, but I remember when I very, very, very first got saved, or sorry, very, very first started pastoring. So I've been 10 years saved. And there was a guy that came in and I introduced myself. I said, my name's Pastor Ford. And I mean, at this time now, I'm pen pastoring for a little while, and it just was normal to introduce myself as Pastor Ford to people who are in church. And I don't go into like Big O Tires and say, yeah, my name's Pastor Ford. I just use my name. But he said, what? No, what's your real name? And that got under my skin. And so I looked at him. I said, my first name's Pastor. And so because it was a bit irritating to me. It was like, why are you going out of your way to undermine pastoring? So there's the other side of the coin, as well, is to undermine it. I'm not gonna bow down to somebody by calling them pastor. Well, it's not bowing down.
Yeah.
And so I hope that gives enough balance to it. For me personally, whatever, like I said, whatever people feel comfortable with, that to me is I like that. There are people, and it's funny because it's the first time in a long time that right now we've got a number of new people, and they're unchurched people. And so they're not, oh, pastor, they're comfortable calling me by my name. And it's like, I almost breathe a sigh of relief, to know that these people that I'm helping know that I'm a human being, and that I'm not just some, entity from God, that's been placed in the church for their well-being, that I'm actually human.
Another question here.
On calling. Okay, calling. Yeah. So the idea of calling and a calling, okay, so calling versus a gift. Okay, the Bible says many are called but few are chosen. So that really needs to put things in its proper perspective. That the whole idea, and pastoring is calling. Okay. And so the idea of a calling is that this is your purpose. This is your purpose in life. Why you live on this earth. And there's some people that their idea of calling only it's limited to pastor. And so you have people that they go to church. They're what I've been calling your ordinary people. Your ordinary Christians. They go to church and they don't really even identify with the church. It really at all, because their identity is in what they're doing, their thing. Whether it's their job or their hobby, or whatever, that it's their thing. And so they go to church to do the, to punch their religious time card. But then when they leave the church, they put their time card in and they go down to the things that they really want to be involved in. Their real purpose in life, which is, remote control cars or, whatever, it's anything. It could be whatever, and that's their real purpose in life. And so when we talk about calling, it's just what's God's purpose for your life. And so gifts are associated with that. Gifts are associated with that purpose. So God, so he calls us and then he equips us, and there are giftings. And that's why I said, pastoring is a calling, because pastoring also requires gifting. The last thing you want to do is try to pastor and not be called. You'll be terrible at it. You'll be absolutely horrible at it, because it's not something that you learn just through normal life skills. It's something that God has to do deep in your soul, and there has to be gifting involved. And sometimes it's scary, because God will speak to me about people, not all the time. I don't want to give that kind of impression, but there are times where God will just speak to me about people, or just drop some thought in my mind about somebody or some circumstance. And then for me, it's like, oh, okay, and kind of pray about it, and then realize, that there was some serious issue that was associated with this. And I didn't realize how important it was, but God was just involving me in it. And so it's very, very important to understand that calling is purpose, and the gifting is the ability to be able to fulfill that purpose.
Mm-hmm. So how do you know who is your pastor? How do you make someone your pastor? Like, is it something you choose?
No,
is it something
God
how
does.
Does that work?
Yeah, God does. No, at some point, no matter where you are. So just real quick, my background and how I got saved is for about 2 years. He was dealing with me really on the outskirts. Because God does not save people in the way that we think. God leads people to salvation. The Spirit draws him. It says nobody can come unto the Father except he be drawn. And so the Father draws us. And that's a very important understanding, is the idea of being drawn. And so the Father draws us. But he doesn't save us. Jesus won't just come down and violate everything that he's put in place to save us. He will draw us. But we can misunderstand that, because we look backwards on things, and hindsight is 20/20, and we look at ourselves as, oh, I was so special. God was doing so many special things in my life. God was doing a lot of special things in my life for 2 years, about 2 years, 18. It's about 2 years, because it was 21 when I got saved. And but I had met this friend of mine, got to know this guy, met him in a place that I was working at, needed a place to stay, ended up moving in with him because he lived right close by. And then he moved out shortly after. Things kind of went sour for me at the job that I was at. And so both of us ended up leaving that job and going our separate ways. But I would think about him. I would think about him from time to time. And I remember it became a thing where I felt absolutely that I needed to find him. I felt this almost compulsion to find him. And then long story short, I found him. He actually found me by going back to visit that place where we were working at. And my dad happened to have gotten a job at that same place. And so gave my dad his phone number. And then I saw my dad gave me his phone number, and I felt this compulsion to call him. It was like, this was the moment that I had been thinking about for years. And I would run into mutual friends, and so that was a big thing, in my mind is I got to find this guy. And so now I've got his number. So I called him, and that was Christmas Day in 1982. And that's when, and he said, hey, I got something to tell you. And so I hitchhiked over to his house. At that time, hitchhiking was okay. So I hitchhiked over to his house. And on Christmas Day, this was on Christmas Day after I finished with my parents and was going back, to go do other things. And so I made my way over. He was living in a guy's house with some other guys. And that's where he started witnessing to me. And again, shortening the story, ultimately, I went to church with him after fighting for 2 weeks. And then I ended up praying to receive Jesus at that church. And guess what? There's my pastor, the guy who was running that church, because that's where God led me. God led me to a church, and that church was where he wanted me to be so that I could be pastored.
And so the pastor of that church.
The pastor of that church became my pastor, because that church became my church. I always groan when I hear people talk about, this church, or this fellowship. And it's usually in a time when they're contemplating doing something out of their own flesh.
Yeah.
And they'll say something like, well, I know this church says, I know this fellowship says, they'll say things like that, and I'll go, oh no, here we go. You're getting ready to you want to make a decision out of the will of God, but you want to convince yourself it is the will of God. And so you have to divorce that from any direction and guidance that God has been giving you through the church, through the pastor, through everything else.
Yeah. Okay, we are at 8:16.
Yeah.
I didn't get through all my questions, but you guys, great questions. Really glad you guys tuned in this way. Yeah, I have a ton more I wanted to ask.
Nope, done, finished. I told you.
That's good. I'm glad
done.
I have questions left over. Yeah, I'm not saying let's keep going. I'm like, how do we work this out? Part 2? No, never mind. We're
done.
good.
My head's
So
done.
anyway,
Mush.
next week we will talk about personality traits. I think that's a great one, and I'm actually legit inspired and writing notes this whole time. So because I haven't been asking questions, I've been just listening and writing notes. So we're glad you guys joined us. Hit the like and subscribe button. That helps these videos as well. As we said, and we've said many times, this is for.
I want to break in.
Oh,
I want to break in. I don't care. I don't care about likes and subscribes as far as popularity and other people seeing them. I don't care if anybody ever sees these ever. Okay, except people that can be helped.
Yeah.
And so I want you to subscribe only so you don't miss them. And that's because it sends out an email to you when you subscribe, and
Yes.
then when we go live in case you've forgotten and you want to be here for it. But at the same time, really the focus of this, I'm glad, and tell people that you think is going to be helped by this. And like the couple was in that are friends of some of the people in our church and stuff like that. That's great. I want you to be a part of this. I want you to learn, but I want that to be the sort of outer circle of people. I really want to focus on people here that if you're in the San Mateo area, if you're in San Mateo County and you're listening to these, please let people know about it, that and involve them in it, because that's really my heart. Is we want to see people become part of the church and to be saved and to live for God. And because that's what happened to me, I got saved and God just did such a tremendous thing in my life. And I know there's a lot of religion out there and there's a lot of craziness out there. And some of you are listening and you're hearing things that you've never heard before. And so the only thing I can say to that is if you're in a church that doesn't believe these kinds of things, then I would be praying, and I would be talking. I would go to the leadership of that church and tell them, I've been listening to these things. What do you think about this biblically? These are the things that I found scripturally. What do you think about them? And if they say things like, well, we don't believe that, this is our doctrine, this is our teaching, go find another place where you can find a Bible-based church and get involved, because it's very, very important that you be in a not your ordinary church. And I'm not encouraging people to leave their churches or anything like that. That's why I say be very, very careful and prayerful about the decisions that you make, because church hopping that's a bad sport. That's a sport where everybody in it gets injured. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I don't recommend it. Sorry to keep going on. Go on.
Okay. Click the like and subscribe button and invite people, bring people, tell people about the podcast. Like he said, people that need help. And we will see you guys next week.